Hey everybody, my name is Adam Neely and welcome to the Superfast Instagram Q&A. Let's get started.
Superfast Instagram Q&A.
Hi Adam, why D-flat 9 sharp 11 sounds so nice after F minor 9? Yeah, sounds quite nice. To me it sounds, dare I say, bluesy. Mainly because of that dominant 7th on that D-flat 9 sharp 11, that B or enharmonic C flat. That there is the blue note, or the tritone in the key of F minor. You can use the F minor blues scale if you would like over that chord progression, and it would sound quite nice. What makes the progression most interesting to me is the presence of that G natural in the F minor 9, as well as the G natural in the D-flat 9 sharp 11. The sound of that natural 9 in a minor key, combined with the sound of that flat 5, the blues sound has this very noir sound to it. Especially if you're doing it as kind of like a 2-chord vamp. To me it feels like something that Charles Mingus would write, like something out of the Black Saint and the Sinner Lady. I don't know, the whole thing has a fairly Mungusian vibe to it. Quite like it. Mi, fa, sol, la, fa, ti, re, mi. Phrygian lick. Very nice. Is bossa nova jazz? So yeah, I think Brazilian bossa nova is very much considered part of the jazz tradition. And the way that you can tell is whether or not people study it in jazz school, which they do. Almost every trained jazz musician I know is intimately familiar with the Girl from Ipanema. But interestingly, almost always in the key of F, because that's how it's taught in American jazz schools. F is the key in which it's written in the real book, which is interesting because the original recording that everybody knows that Yal Gilberto and Stan Getz did is in the key of D flat. What this means is I think there are really two traditions of bossa nova. Bossa nova as it's performed by Brazilians, and then bossa nova as it's performed by Americans as propagated through American jazz schools. How to be a good MD band leader. For me, it's very important for MDs to not waste anybody's time at rehearsal. Sometimes you run into situations with band leaders where at rehearsal they don't know what they want or aren't even that prepared on their own music.
What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
That is a huge drag. It's important for everybody to show up to rehearsal prepared, but especially the band leader. How do you handle colossal fuckups at a live show? Well, I think the thing that I've learned the most is to not take yourself too seriously, because things will go wrong, and your reaction is the thing that you can control. Maybe not the music that's happening, maybe not the technical failures, but your own reaction to them. And if you and your fellow musicians can smile through the fuckups, your life will be so much better. You will save yourself a lot of stress if you just don't take it too seriously. It's just music. Do you think irrational time signatures will become more popular? Do you use them? So irrational time signatures like 420 use beat groupings that are not based on the typical powers of 2, like eighth notes or quarter notes. Instead, you might have a measure of, say, 4 eighth note quintuplets, or 20th notes in this case. Irrational time signatures are very specialized in their application. It takes a lot of care to use that kind of specialized musical tool, kind of like fancy words, for example. Some words you simply wouldn't use in your quotidian vernacular. However, there might be some situations, however specialized they may be, where those words will become very useful. It's the same thing with irrational time signatures. People might think you pretentious for using them in certain contexts, but in other contexts, like in some contemporary classical music, like the music of Thomas Otis, they might work. I noticed you recently followed Sammy Wray on Insta. Please grace us with your opinions. Yeah, so I've actually known Sammy Wray for a couple of years. I know her band quite well, they're friends of mine. And it's been really awesome to see her and her band just kick ass over the past couple months. They put on a great live show. If you don't know Sammy Wray, check her out. How do you think pop music will evolve in future? It's almost impossible to tell what kind of music is going to be popular in 1 year, never mind 5 or 10 years. Very smart trendsetters are always trying to figure out the new hot sound, so I can't even begin to say what it's going to be. But I will say that certain aesthetic features of pop music, like the dubstep wobble or the trap 808, are originally tied to much more niche underground genres and communities. So with that in mind, I think there's some trends that we've already started seeing that are going to become more popular, including the so-called Instagram guitar tone, you know, that neo-soul vibe. You might start hearing that in pop music. And then also like more digital distorted tones, like that bass boosted sound, which has gained so much currency in meme culture that, I don't know, maybe it will bleed over into pop music. Who knows? What's that one Sungazer song that goes, that's probably electro. fun song to play. Is there an option to go to music academy but not study anything on an instrument? Yeah, so more and more schools are accepting digital audio workstation production as an alternative to primary instruments. I see this becoming more of the trend in the next 5 years or so. And yes, I do think there is something lost when you don't study how to play a physical instrument, but the trend will give people more access to the music that they're actually creating through DAWs. If the music that you make doesn't require you to play an instrument, then maybe you don't need to study it in school. It'd be very good for you though. Don't get me wrong. Playing musical instruments is good. What do you think is more important for auditions, confidence or preparedness? Well, I think preparedness breeds confidence. If you're confident without being prepared, it's gonna be pretty obvious in most circumstances. Whereas, if you're genuinely prepared, it's hard not to be confident with the material. Be prepared for auditions and things will go very well for you. Does it change the feeling if the melody is in C or in F, or is it just the intervals between the notes? All right, so the system that we have in 12-tone equal temperament technically means that the distances between notes in every key is exactly the same, so there shouldn't really be any differences in feeling between keys. I say shouldn't, because very often there is. The timbre, or sound quality, of different notes and intervals will sometimes vary quite wildly between different keys on different instruments. This sound quality is not something that we think about a whole lot in Western music. However, it's integral to the feeling of different modes and scales in other cultures, like for example, traditional Japanese shakuhachi music.
So you're using an alternative fingering and an alternative means of playing because flat 2 and flat 6 need to have that tone color, which is not a concept that's in Western notation at all.
I've never seen it anywhere else.
So while the intervals are the same, tone color might be very different from key to key, and also from instrument to instrument, which can definitely create different feelings. What strings would you recommend for jazz? The strings that I use are the DR Fat Beams, which used to be marketed as the Marcus Miller Fat Beams. Honestly, I've tried a bunch of different other strings. These are just the ones that I settled on. They're not really any better or worse than any others. I think I just know how this particular brand of string reacts, and I think that's the most important thing. Knowing your gear inside and out is much more important than the gear itself. How much bass is too much? No such thing. What are some of the best fusion records to look into if I want to start getting into the genre? Well, it depends on what kind of fusion you want to get into. If you want something dark and aggressive, try Birds of Fire. Billy Cobham's drumming on that is amazing. If you want something a little bit lighter and prettier, check out Chick Corea's Light as a Feather, an appropriate name. If you want to hear Jaco Pastorius in his prime, check out Heavy Weather by Weather Report. And of course, and I've mentioned this on the channel many times, Herbie Hancock's live album Flood. That album is just, mwah. So good. These albums are all considered classic 70s fusion, and I think are a pretty good introduction to the genre. How does your orchestration inform your arrangements and vice versa? I think they're kind of one and the same, honestly. If I'm writing for a lot of musicians, I'm intimately aware of all of the tone colors I can get from them, and those tone colors, I feel, go hand in hand with arrangement details like chord progressions and rhythms. What is your least favorite note color with your synesthesia? I mean, G is brown. It's not the prettiest of colors, but you know, context. Remember that D-flat 9, sharp 11? That brown sounds pretty nice to me right now. Is Disney music a genre of music or a classification? Disney music, I feel like, is a part of the American musical theater tradition. So in that way, I think it's like a subgenre of musical theater. Sideways has a great video exploring this and how it came to be. So yeah. It's a genre. Does music belong to its audience or its creator? Well, if you look at music as purely an art, you get into that whole death of the author argument. Whether or not the author's, or in this case composer's, opinion really truly matters. I would almost take it a step further with music and say that music is a shared language. I don't own the English language. I haven't invented any of the sounds that I'm speaking right now, and probably I'm not the first person to speak any of them either. Rather, I'm using a shared understanding, the same way that music is a shared understanding, to communicate a specific idea for this specific purpose. And I think I kind of feel the same way about my own music, like Sungazer's music. I mean, legally, yeah, I do like making money by selling it and streaming the music, but in terms of the emotional connection and the ideas that are expressed through it, I think they're for everybody. Can slash chords, C minor over F, etc., have an interval as the bass? Example, A flat major 7 over A plus D flat. So I've never really seen anything like that. Honestly, you could probably just get away with calling this an A flat major over A triad, even though you're not actually using an E in the bass. But in all honesty, the nomenclature of chord symbols started out as a shorthand for the music. It's not the music itself. And if you're really hearing this sound, just write it out in sheet music because it will communicate the idea much more effectively than trying to, you know, write in everything in a chord symbol. What do you think of pianist Hiromi Uehara? Man, I remember first checking her out at Berkeley. I think the first tune that I heard was Return of the Kung Fu Champion. Super influential on what I thought about modern jazz music. She and her music really showed me at a time that I needed it that jazz can be really fun and modern and exciting. And you know, at the time, like 2010, 2011, that was a pretty big influence on me. So if you don't know Hiromi's music, go check her out. Fully recommend it. What would an irrational polyrhythm sound like? Example, E over pi. You might be joking, but there is a composer that you should check out that wrote a canon with the rhythmic ratio of E to pi, and that is the composer Conlin Nancarrow. But yeah, when people talk about like odd time signatures, I'm like, yo, dude, odd time signatures are cool. But have you ever checked out an E to pi canon? Pretty sweet. Why jazz? I ask myself that question every day.
Superfast Instant Q&A.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you enjoy what I do here on this channel, please consider donating to my Patreon, because it's my patrons over at my Patreon that make this channel possible. And yeah, stay safe, everybody.